On a chilly winter night in 1944, deep in the forests of the Ardennes, Lieutenant Henry S. Jones, Jr. crouched beside a wounded soldier, cradling the man's head in his lap. All around them, mortar fire whistled in the darkness, and snow fell so thick it muffled every sound but the groans of the injured. Henry was only 24 years old that night, but his eyes carried the weight of a much older soul. In a soft voice, he promised the soldier, his friend, that he'd get him home to see his newborn daughter. It was a simple vow, offered in the midst of chaos, yet it captures the tender empathy that often went unnoticed behind Henry's stoic demeanor. For anyone who later met this quiet officer from Kentucky, that moment reveals the beating heart of a man shaped by compassion, courage, and an unwavering sense of duty. Henry S. Jones, Jr. was born on August 30th, 1920, in a small town outside Lexington, Kentucky. The decade was one of profound social change as the United States reeled from World War I and experienced the euphoric heights of the Roaring Twenties. Henry's family lived in a modest wood-frame farmhouse on the outskirts of town. His father, Henry Sr., worked as a postman who delivered mail across dusty country roads. His mother, Beatrice, was a part-time seamstress who sewed quilts for neighbors and taught Sunday school at a local church. They were devout Baptists, but more than religious dogma. What filled their home was a sense of generosity and neighborly kindness. Young Henry observed how his parents welcomed strangers during church socials or rushed to help after a storm wrecked a neighbor's barn. Acts of service became his normal, everyday example. While the family didn't have much money, Henry grew up surrounded by love and acceptance. He was the eldest of 3 children, with 2 younger sisters he adored. Day after day he did chores, feeding chickens, cleaning stables, and walked a mile each way to attend the local school. After class, he'd sneak away to a hidden creek where he taught himself to fish by watching older boys. He'd sometimes bring a string of perch or catfish home, beaming with pride at the dinner he was providing. As the Great Depression hit in 1929, the Jones family, like so many others, struggled. Yet Henry's parents maintained an unshakable optimism that tough times would eventually pass. Perhaps that's where he learned resilience, watching them face adversity with steadfast resolve. Henry was tall for his age, quiet, and given to reflective moods. He loved books and devoured anything about history, especially the Civil War and the Revolutionary War. Reading about the sacrifices of earlier generations sparked his curiosity about what it meant to serve one's country. In high school, he excelled at English and math, but it was on the basketball court that he truly thrived. Though he was no star athlete, Henry's coaches praised his determination and sportsmanship. He'd often gather with teammates after a game, sipping milkshakes at the local diner, listening more than he talked. Everyone could sense the kindness in him, although some mistook his reserve for shyness. Underneath, he was a deeply empathetic soul, ready to help if anyone needed a friend. By the late 1930s, the international situation was growing dire. Hitler's Germany had begun annexing territory in Europe, and aggression by Japan was destabilizing the Pacific. After graduating high school in 1938, Henry dreamed of attending college to become a teacher, hoping to share his passion for history. However, money was scarce. He worked odd jobs, anything from laboring on a tobacco farm to clerking at the local store. Then came the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941. The shock reverberated across the nation. Like countless other young Americans, Henry felt the pull of enlistment. He believed his country needed him, and so did the free world. In January 1942, at age 21, Henry joined the U.S. Army. Basic training took him away from rural Kentucky to Fort Benning, Georgia. The shift was jarring. From quiet farmland to rows of barracks, from feeding chickens at sunrise to running early morning obstacle courses. Henry adapted quickly, though. He found the discipline of Army life oddly reassuring. He developed a sharp eye for detail. Tents had to be pitched just so, uniforms inspected, rifles cleaned until they gleamed. He also found himself drawn to leadership roles. Superiors noticed his calm presence and ability to empathize with anxious recruits. At first, Henry didn't see himself as a leader, but the Army had a habit of pushing men forward who showed even a glimmer of potential. Within months, Henry was sent to officer candidate school, where he worked tirelessly to prove worthy of a lieutenant's bar. Commissioned as a second lieutenant in late 1942, Henry felt both pride and trepidation. He was assigned to the 12th Infantry Regiment, part of the U.S. Army's 4th Infantry Division. The division was soon deployed to England to train for what everyone knew was coming: a massive Allied invasion of Nazi-occupied Europe. Days were packed with drills, amphibious landing simulations, and classes on battlefield tactics. The soldiers, many still in their teens, looked to Henry and other officers for guidance. Henry wrote letters home describing how he felt the weight of their expectations. In one letter to his father, he confessed, "I'm just trying not to let them down, Dad. Sometimes I wonder if I'll measure up, but I remember what you taught me, that a steady heart can see a man through anything." Finally, on June 6, 1944, D-Day, Henry's regiment landed on Utah Beach in Normandy, France. The chaos of that morning remains legendary. Artillery thundered, gunfire raked the shoreline, and the roar of landing craft motors blended with the cries of the wounded. Henry, a fresh first lieutenant by then, led a small platoon of about 30 men. Clutching his rifle boots soaked with seawater, he pressed forward through waves of enemy fire. In later accounts, a private from his platoon recalled how Henry insisted on being the first out of the landing craft, shielding younger soldiers behind him. He moved with purpose, scanning for sniper nests, shouting encouragement to those pinned down. The plan was to secure the exits off the beach so that Allied armor could move inland. But in such confusion, plans often dissolved into pure improvisation. Henry's calm voice cut through the bedlam, ordering men to take cover, return fire, and advance in short dashes. By day's end, they had fought their way inland, liberating a small French village called Sainte-Marie-du-Mont. Henry was stunned by the devastation: houses reduced to rubble, fields churned into muddy wrecks. But among the ruins, he saw villagers emerging, offering timid thanks and tears of relief. That sight crystallized his commitment to freeing Europe from tyranny. In the subsequent weeks, the 4th Infantry Division pushed deeper into Normandy, battling entrenched German forces in hedgerows and farmland. The fighting was brutal, casualties mounted. Henry lost close friends to sniper fire and artillery shells. Letters home hinted at his emotional toll. "Ma, I see so much sorrow here," he wrote. "Each day I wonder how we keep going. Then I remember how much these people have suffered. We have to keep pushing forward to end all this." Despite the heartache, he earned a reputation for genuine care. He'd visit wounded soldiers in field hospitals, writing letters for them if they couldn't hold a pen, or quietly praying by their bedside. They respected him not just as a lieutenant, but as a man who genuinely understood their fear and pain. By autumn, after the liberation of Paris, Henry's unit advanced to the Netherlands, participating in the broad Allied offensive, aimed at driving Nazi forces back into Germany. During Operation Market Garden, though primarily an airborne operation, the 4th Infantry still had roles to play in securing supply lines and reinforcing strategic positions. Henry's platoon spent several weeks near a small Dutch village, forging friendships with locals who offered them bread and coffee. One evening, A local family invited Henry to their farmhouse. Around a cramped dinner table, they served a simple meal. The father, who spoke broken English, thanked Henry for protecting them from further Nazi reprisals. Touched, Henry replied with his limited Dutch phrases, expressing gratitude for their hospitality. Moments like this kept his morale alive, even as the war's brutality lingered just a few miles away. When winter came, so did one of the war's fiercest battles, the German Ardennes counteroffensive, known to history as the Battle of the Bulge. Henry's unit found itself in snow-laden forests, short on supplies, and uncertain about the enemy's next move. Temperatures dropped below freezing, and the men huddled in foxholes to keep warm. On Christmas Eve, Henry led a patrol to scout enemy positions. They stumbled upon a hidden machine gun nest. In the ensuing firefight, one of Henry's best friends, a staff sergeant, was badly wounded. Risking his own life, Henry crawled across open ground to pull him to safety, ignoring bullets that snapped through the icy branches above them. A medic later said that without Henry's quick action, the sergeant would have died. But that rescue was also the moment Henry found himself kneeling in the snow, holding his friend's head and whispering that promise, "We'll get you home," he said. The Ardennes battles concluded in early 1945, with Allied forces driving the Germans back again. Henry's platoon kept advancing through Luxembourg and into Germany. In the spring, as the Nazi regime teetered, they uncovered the horrors of forced labor camps and liberated towns that had endured years under oppressive rule. The emotional toll on Henry soared. Diary entries from that time reveal a man grappling with both triumph and despair. In one entry, he wrote, "What good is victory if we've lost so many dear friends? I feel torn between celebrating the end of this nightmare and mourning those who didn't make it." Still, he carried on, encouraging his men that they were close to finishing the job. When Germany finally surrendered in May 1945, Henry felt an almost overwhelming sense of relief. He thought the worst was behind him, and perhaps a peaceful life awaited. The war had shifted him from a farm boy to an experienced combat officer. In July 1945, he reunited with his family in Kentucky. His mother and sisters wept as they embraced him on the train platform. Henry's father, typically reserved, just nodded and squeezed his son's shoulder, eyes shining with pride. For a few weeks, Henry attempted normalcy. He helped repair fences, visited old friends, and caught catfish in that same creek he loved as a child. But nothing quite felt the same. Nightmares haunted him. He'd jolt awake, sweating, hearing phantom artillery shells. In quiet moments, he found himself replaying the war, the faces of lost comrades, the helpless civilians, the bitter cold of Bastogne. The army offered him a permanent commission, and though part of him longed for a gentler path, he accepted. Maybe he felt the army was where he belonged. He was stationed at Fort Knox for a time, helping to train new recruits. After the atomic bombs ended the war in the Pacific, Henry was finally demobilized in 1946. He considered going to college on the GI Bill, remembering those old dreams of becoming a teacher, and so he enrolled at the University of Kentucky, majoring in history. He was older than most of the freshmen. He carried himself with a quiet dignity, and classmates who recognized the ribbons on his uniform or the scars on his forearms treated him with a mix of curiosity and respect. During a campus social, Henry met a fellow student, Mary Caldwell, a nursing major. Mary was bright, talkative, and drawn to Henry's gentle spirit. Within months, they were inseparable. She wrote in her journal that he carried a sadness in his eyes, but also a kindness I've never known. I love him for both. They married in the summer of 1948, starting a life in a small apartment near campus. Henry continued his studies while Mary completed her nursing program. Money was tight, but they managed. He took part-time jobs, tutoring younger students or helping with farm chores on weekends. The couple's first child, a son named Benjamin, arrived in 1950. Henry, thrilled yet nervous, approached fatherhood with the same sense of duty he had displayed in the Army. Late at night, he'd rock Benjamin to sleep, humming old hymns. However, the specter of war lingered. More than once, Mary found him alone on their tiny balcony, staring at the moonlit sky, tears quietly running down his cheeks. She didn't press. She understood that some pains defy words. Then came a twist. The Korean War broke out in June 1950, and Henry, as an officer in the Army Reserve, was called back to active duty. The decision to go was agonizing. Mary was proud of him but terrified. With a young child at home, Henry wrestled with his conscience. Still, he felt an unshakable responsibility to serve. He boarded a train for the West Coast, promising Mary and Benjamin he'd return soon. In Korea, Henry commanded a rifle company, facing a new kind of conflict in a harsh terrain halfway around the globe. The swirl of politics there seemed more complicated than the struggle against Nazi Germany, but Henry tried to focus on the welfare of his men. Once again, he found himself forging bonds with new recruits, sharing heartbreak when they lost friends, and holding unwavering in the face of enemy fire. Letters from Korea reveal a man both seasoned by prior war and weary of repeating its horrors. "I'm older now," he wrote to Mary, "and each casualty hurts more. I understand better what it means to leave someone behind." Yet Henry's leadership shone. He arranged moments of respite, hot meals, small celebrations on a soldier's birthday, anything to maintain morale. Some in the unit dubbed him Papa Jones, a nod to his paternal care for them. After intense battles near the Pusan perimeter and subsequent drives north, Henry finally returned stateside in mid-1952. He bore new physical scars and deeper emotional ones. Though he left the Army again, he carried an abiding sense that war had marked him irreversibly. Reunited with Mary and young Benjamin, Henry returned to his studies, eventually completing a master's degree in education. He took a teaching job at a local high school. By day, he taught history, enthralling teenagers with stories of ancient battles and modern conflicts. By night, he waged private battles with insomnia and flashbacks. Mary confided to a close friend that sometimes she'd find him sitting on the floor of Benjamin's room, trembling, as if listening for danger in the silence. She loved him fiercely but struggled to help him heal. Henry, for his part, threw himself into teaching, believing knowledge might prevent future wars, or at least help young people understand the costs. Despite his best efforts at a peaceful life, controversies occasionally arose. Some parents objected to his frank discussion of the brutality of war. They considered it inappropriate for high schoolers. Henry, however, believes shielding youth from reality did them no favors. They must know war's horror, he argued, so they'll think twice before glorifying it. Meanwhile, certain veterans groups urged him to speak about his heroism, but Henry felt uneasy wearing the label hero. He viewed his actions as simply what anyone in his position would do. That humility endeared him to many, but also sparked debate. Should the horrific nature of war overshadow the valor displayed by soldiers like Henry? Historians note that Henry's story exemplifies the moral gray areas. Honorable service, yes, but also the lasting trauma and the question of whether war can ever be justified fully. In the early 1960s, as the civil rights movement and the Cold War dominated national conversation, Henry's perspective continued to evolve. He taught about the roots of injustice and the perils of ideological extremes. He supported peaceful protest, believing in the fundamental equality of all people. Some local politicians criticized him, calling him too soft on communism or too radical on civil rights. But Henry's experiences in World War II and Korea had led him to a simple conclusion. Human life was precious, no matter one's background or ideology, and only by respecting each other's basic humanity could society avoid more devastating conflicts. By the 1970s, Henry was a father of three: Benjamin, Sarah, and Paul. He served as a mentor to many students who went on to become teachers or local leaders themselves. Occasionally, news outlets or historians researching the Normandy landings would track him down for interviews. Henry would speak quietly about D-Day or the Battle of the Bulge, focusing on the bravery of the men under his command, seldom mentioning his own heroism. Once a journalist asked how he felt about killing enemy soldiers. Henry paused for a long time, then replied, "I never hated them, even at the moment of firing my weapon. They were caught in this storm, just like us. War makes enemies out of people who might otherwise share a meal." Despite relative calm in his later life, the emotional wounds never fully disappeared. Mary noticed that each anniversary of a major battle, June 6th or December 16th, Henry grew withdrawn. He'd walk the perimeter of their small yard at dusk, sometimes talking to himself in hushed tones. She tried gently to coax him to share, but he often just shook his head, tears shimmering. Still, there were moments of grace. A letter from one of his old war buddies arrived once, thanking Henry for saving his life in the Ardennes and announcing the birth of a grandson. Henry read it 3 times and then showed Mary with a trembling smile. Even decades later, those bonds and memories lived on, bridging the distance between past and present. Henry died in 1982 from a heart condition, surrounded by his family. His funeral was modest, attended by local folks, former students, and a handful of veterans who remembered the quiet lieutenant who led them through the nightmares of war. In his eulogy, a teacher colleague praised Henry's unwavering sense of moral responsibility, observing, "He fought in 2 wars, but never lost his faith in humanity." That line resonated with everyone who knew him. They remembered a man who endured horrific battles, yet emerged with empathy and tact, a trait both rare and profoundly inspiring. In the years since, historians have occasionally debated Henry's significance. He wasn't a household name, wasn't a high-ranking general or a political figure. He was a lieutenant, a small cog in the vast machinery of the U.S. military during World War II and Korea. But within that role, he shaped countless lives, from the men in his platoon who trusted him with their fates, to the high school students who found in him a teacher who had truly been there, to the local community that saw his kindness shine in everyday acts of service. Some scholars point out that individuals like Henry, quiet, steadfast officers, constituted the backbone of Allied forces, their small decisions and leadership actions collectively determining major outcomes on the battlefield. Debates arise about whether the Allies could have succeeded with fewer of such officers, or how leadership training fosters that blend of discipline and compassion. For modern audiences, Henry's story resonates because it's one of ordinary heroism, of a man who never sought the spotlight, but answered the call of duty when it echoed across the world. His experiences shine light on the brutal costs of war, not just in terms of lost lives and destroyed towns, but the lingering emotional burdens carried by those who survive. Reflecting on Henry's life today, we're invited to see beyond the numbers and timelines of historical conflict. We glimpse the inner world of a man who learned to balance discipline with compassion, who discovered that real leadership involves caring as much as commanding. He returned from war to teach the next generation, refusing to glamorize what he'd seen. Instead, he tried to encourage critical thought, moral courage, and the willingness to see each person, even an adversary, as fully human. For anyone looking at headlines about global tensions and conflicts in our modern world, Henry's story offers a gentle, timeless reminder. The bravest path isn't always the loud, aggressive one. Sometimes it's the path that quietly stands up for life, understanding, and respect. And that's all for today's video. Don't forget to leave a like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe so you'll always be in the loop. Thanks for watching.